Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Good evening. On behalf of Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center, I'd like to welcome you all to the LA book launch of Cenizas by Cynthia Guardado. Please give her a hand. My name is Jimmy Vega. I'm the Assistant Director of Beyond Baroque. I'd like to start by acknowledging Beyond Baroque's presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tonga peoples. We acknowledge the wrong done to these peoples through settler colonialism, genocidal practices, and the violent disposition of their land. As an arts organization, we are committed to uplifting Indigenous communities, their stories, and cultures. For those who don't know, Beyond Baroque is Los Angeles's oldest literary arts center, located here in Venice, California. Founded in 1968, first as an experimental literary magazine before reimagining itself and becoming the literary institution we know it as today. We're based out of the original Venice City Hall and support writers and help cultivate new writing through our extensive program of writing workshops, readings, and performances. We're currently offering a number of workshops online via Zoom, such as our free weekly Monday night fiction workshop facilitated by Raquel Baker, and our historic Wednesday night poetry workshop currently facilitated by Jose Hernandez Diaz. Aside from our workshops, we offer several readings throughout the year. Next week on Thursday, October 27th, we'll be hosting an evening of LA Independent Presses with Sunflower Station and Not a Cult. And on Saturday, October 29th, we will be welcoming the National Poetry Coalition to Long Beach with a poetry reading titled Coalescence, featuring Harriet Mullen, Peter J. Harris, Kathy Lynche, and others at the Hub in Long Beach, co-sponsored by Urban Word and the Long Beach Public Library. And later this year, on November 18th, 19th, and 20th, we are pleased to announce that we'll be bringing back the Southern California Poetry Festival to Beyond Baroque. So please save those dates and join us, please. For more details on all of that, please visit our website at beyondbaroque.org. I would also like to invite you all to our inaugural launch of Beyond the Binding, a Beyond Baroque book club hosted by Dana Johnson. The first book discussed will be Kindred by Octavia Butler on November 5th. And our second book discussion will be on A Handful of Earth, A Handful of Sky, The World of Octavia Butler by Linnell George. Linnell will also be joining us on the second installment of that book club on December 3rd. So please check all of that out. And currently on display in our Mike Kelly Gallery, we're featuring One Cent Life, an exhibition of framed poems and color lithographs from the collaborative portfolio One Cent Life, organized by Sam Francis and Wallace Ting in 1964. Considered a landmark pop publication, the portfolio includes original color lithographs by 28 artists, including Andy Warhol and Robert Rauschenberg, among others. And finally, we offer a number of memberships to Beyond Baroque for as little as $50 for an individual membership. Purchasing a membership allows us the opportunity to offer free and online programming. And of course, they also help us to facilitate our free weekly writing workshops. As many of you know, our memberships also provide a discount on our intensive workshops as well. A special thanks to our wonderful staff. Thank you to Quentin Ring, our executive director, our programs coordinator, Ivan Salinas, who couldn't be with us tonight, Lenny, who's running things in the bookstore, Eric and Dan, who are in the booth tonight with us. And a huge thanks to Sochi, Andres, and Lily Flor for joining us in celebrating Cenizas tonight. I think tonight's going to be a really special event. We do have copies of Cenizas in our bookstore, so please purchase one tonight. And Cynthia will be signing them outside in our Poets Garden later this evening. And a warm thank you to all of you who are joining us in collective space, both here and online virtually. But now, without further ado, please help me welcome our host for the evening, Cynthia Guardado.
So I didn't want anyone to host just because I, specifically asked the people who are part of today's event to share it with me. So I wanted to make sure to be the one to introduce them. So I will be reading Lily Flor del Valle's bio, but I do want to say that ever since the first time I saw Lily Flor perform, I was super inspired and mesmerized by what she does. And she's Salvadorian, which is why I really wanted her to be here ever since I knew that the book would be coming out. Lily Flor del Valle is a first-generation Salvadoreña, mother, musician, and composer with community roots in Northeast San Fernando Valley. She strives to live each day artfully, and her Instagram is Lily Flor Los Campos. Please welcome Lily Flor. And Brian. Good evening, buenas noches a todos. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here celebrating the release of this very important publication. This is the homie Brian Glashow, also known as El Gringuito Sabroso. He's been part of my project Lily Flor y Los Compas pretty much since the beginning. And well, para no platicar mucho, vamos a entrarle. So this song is called Sinachly, and it talks about the potential, the exponential
growth that I see in each and every single one of us. I see each and every single person here as a seed with the exponential potentiality for growth and spreading of more seeds, of more positivity, of love, and so much more. We hope you like it. La semilla nace y crece por buscar rayos del sol, raíz que en tierra pertenece y que el aire sustentó. Así es como reverdece. Tallo, capullo y flor. La semilla cuando vuela lejos llegará. Renacimos de cenizas, somos flor en primavera. Renacimos de semillas, somos flor en primavera. Y exigimos la justicia. La victoria es certera. Ay, la semilla cuando vuela lejos llegará. Pensaron que con matarnos de un problema se libraron, sin saber que al enterrarnos muchas semillas sembraron. Ahora bellos son los montes que de flores se llenaron. Flor nocturna, color de arrayán, con sus colores hay de hipnotizar. De su fragancia no se diga más. Dulce su miel es, ay, qué rico el manjar. Y el que no ha probado no puede opinar, no puede opinar, no puede opinar. This next song is called La Sombra. It's a story that was passed on to me by my mother, who is from El Salvador. She came to this country in the 80s. She was pregnant with me and she was fleeing from the war because they were looking to kill her. You know, so if she wouldn't have made it to this place, I probably wouldn't be here singing tonight. The song talks about a shadow that was chasing her to kill her. But there are so many shadows that persecute women, have persecuted women all over the world. And so this song is not just about the shadow chasing my mother, but the shadow that has chased so many women for such a long time. Let there be light.
Colina abajo ella corría, su corazón con llanto y pena, dentro de su pecho fuerte latía. Unos hombres que la buscaban, gracias al cielo no hubo un soplón. Ella sabía si la encontraban, solo regresa al mundo solo. María Teresa, ¿cómo fue? Todos queríamos saber cómo te pudiste esconder de aquella sombra tan cruel. Los árboles me lo decían, el toro me lo lloraba, entre las lianas que se mecían, todos en coro me cantaban. Soy un disparo con un cañón, bajo una rama pues se escondió, cerró los ojos pidiendo el cielo, en esta noche no muera yo, pero una bala de aquel convoy, bajo esa rama fue y la tocó, fluyó la sangre y aún así la sombra no pudo detener esos pies de María, que por su vida corría, esos pies de María, que por 2 vidas corría. Cuidado, ten cuidado, que la sombra
time with y'all tonight, but let's see if we can squeeze in a couple more, okay? ¿Con cuál le seguimos, Brian? Bumblebee? Okay. So I am blessed to be a mother. And they are not here today, but every time I get a chance to, I like to share this song. I call them my bumblebee, and this is I guess a song about the things that I wish for them. We're going through the intro how we normally do it, right? I think we have one more. Este instrumento, you know, like you go through life and you pick up tools along the way, and those tools, you use them to build something, create something. Many years ago, I want to say 12 years ago, I came across Tia Chucha Centro Cultural. I was their intern for Tia Chucha Press. And Trini Rodriguez, who was the director at the time, gave me permission to use some of my workday time to take the Son Jarocho workshop. And that is how I came across, you know, how I came to, you know, be introduced to this instrument and to this music that comes from Veracruz in Mexico. Music is community-based, and after having taken a hiatus from music for a really long time, I found myself once again on fertile ground where I was able to sing, dance, and eventually it turned into this. So that's the importance of spaces like this, making these connections, sharing what you know, each one teach one, because there's people out there who need that connection and eventually find the permission to speak their truths, to tell their stories. I tell these stories because I tell them the stories of my family, where we come from, because I didn't see those stories growing up much, you know? And so it's important for each and every single one of us to add our thread to the tapestry. And so we're gonna do a son jarocho. It's called La Morena, and we hope you like it. Once again, a big thank you to Brian, who's always, there with me. He's always down. Congratulations to Cynthia on this achievement. We need more of these words. And we're excited to hear the rest of the amazing lineup we have ready for tonight. Muchas gracias. If you want to follow on social media, Lili Flor y los compas, muchas gracias por el tiempo.
everyone could give Lily Flor and Los Campos compas another round of applause. Next up is Xochitl Julissa Bermejo. And I asked Xochitl to be here because I feel that Xochitl is a huge part of my writing community, and we support each other in so many different ways. So I really wanted them to be here. And as their bio will tell you, that they're the director of Women Who Submit, which is a wonderful organization that pushes us to submit because we don't that often. I don't, that's true. So Xochitl Julissa Bermejo is the daughter of Mexican immigrants and the author of Posada, Offerings of Witness and Refuge, Sundress Publications 2016, a former Steinbeck Fellow and Poets and Writers, California Writers Exchange winner. She's received residencies from Hedgebrook, Ragdale, National Parks Art Foundation, and Poetry Foundation. She has poetry published in Accentos Review, Calix, American Poetry Review, and most recently her poem Battlegrounds was featured at Academy of American Poets Poem a Day and On Being's Poetry Unbound. Her poetry and organizing are inspired by her Chicana experience and a drive to cultivate comfort in chaotic times. She is a director of Women Who Submit, a literary organization fighting for gender parity in publishing. Her second collection, Incantation, Love Poems for Battle Sites, is forthcoming from Mouthful Press, Fall 2023. Please welcome Xochitl.
Thank you, Cynthia. I just want to say that I'm so honored to be here on this big night. A couple of us were kind of talking beforehand. We were reminiscing about times we hung out with you, like going to poetry events and then going to eat after. And literally the last cool thing I did before lockdowns was we were at the CAM and we were seeing Dennis Smith at a poetry reading. It was Valentine's Day. And then we went out to eat in Little Tokyo after, and we stayed out kind of late. I don't remember. And I would think about that in lockdowns, like that was a good time. At least my last night out was a good time. And so I'm glad I shared that with you. And then I think about during those times we went on a bike ride and you were telling me all about this book and how the editing was kicking your ass. And so I'm just so proud of you that you pushed through all that. There's a lot that's been happening and you pushed through that and you got this book out into the world. And so yeah, let's give her. I picked 3 poems. The poems I picked were kind of based on, I think, things that I'm inspired by Cynthia about, things that kind of make us friends and kind of, brings us together. So this first one, Cynthia inspires me in her badassness. She's a badass and I love it. And it inspires me to be badass. I tried to bring my most badass, and I wore black for her today. Some dope earrings, So yeah. So that's what this first one is about. Being badass. Rancherita. Tengo panza, pero no pancita, pero panzota. And cypress thighs, brown and strong, that cling to your cliffs, reminding you you're not yet ocean. Lucky you to have Earth's devotion, to be gripped tight by beginnings. This rancherita belongs beyond borders, grows over and under fences, wild, untamable, is not unattainable. She is mountain woman, nopalita with spines, a jumping cholla, a chola that jumps at the first sign of hate. Wait, I can't claim chola. I've never been honored with a hood name, but her hoops, not with my spine, rocks, and root within. Thank you. And this next one is kind of inspired by, I love seeing your posts about going to Tijuana. I grew up going to Tijuana. We would go there for shoes, all the gear before school would start every year. We'd go for Christmas shopping. And so those trips down, my dad would in the morning just be like, get in. And I'd be like, where are you going? He's like, don't worry about it, get in. And then all of a sudden we'd be in Tijuana. And I'm like, what? Okay. And so that's kind of in this poem. And also just being the children of immigrants. So this is learning the hustle or to be a child of immigrants. TGIF plays in the background. Tanner's in the kitchen while you and your brother work the living room floor assembly line. Individually package merchandise. Slip metallic decals in the shape of cowboy hats into cellophane envelopes. Crease the flap, staple it shut. Fold multicolored bandanas, stack them by state. Durango, Jalisco, Chihuahua, Nayarit. Saturday morning, wake early, no cartoons, pack the van. Saturday afternoon, display the inventory. Saturday evening, watch men in 501 bandanas wagging from back pockets, dance with one leg propelling. Gritos bounce off Budweiser-soaked ground, bodies move like broken, crowds build like fire. Try your best to not be frightened. Sell what you can. Parrot your mother, the way she flirts. Ándale, caballero. They laugh. She pockets the cash. Remember, your great-grandfather sold raspados in the church square with syrups concocted from scratch. Remember, your grandfather constructed a squatchet barbershop behind his Boyle Heights home, furnished with an authentic barber chair, white porcelain, and smooth. Remember, your father drove you on afternoon turnarounds to Tijuana for new stock in a brown Volkswagen van. Hot beige vinyl stuck to your thighs. Across the border, cousins manning a taco shop didn't speak your language. Skinned goats hung hooked from the kitchen ceiling. Pink chicle became payment for a day's work. And then this last one I picked because I know that Cynthia and I both, as teachers, as writers, as organizers, we care a lot about, what we're bringing to this world and reimagining what this world can be. So that's why I picked this one. It was written in July 2020, so soon after George Floyd's murder, when in the city there was a lot of protests and there was a lot of curfews. It was a really scary time. And also, I'm from San Gabriel, so east of East LA, where there's a mission. And I actually grew up going to that mission. I went to school there, and my family's very devout Catholics. And so at that time as well, somebody lit the church on fire. And it was crazy because around the same time, I had just written this poem, and I actually was going to record it for something. And it was all about how we're going to tear down the church. And then that happened. And I was like, I often think that as poets, we have magic and we are. So then I was like, oh shit, my mom's gonna kill me. I made this happen. I don't know. So then I started thinking maybe it's not enough just to tear down. What are we gonna do with the parts? What are we trying to build up? And so that's this poem, just reimagining what we could do if we together brought monuments like that down. Love poem for LA, July 2020. 1. May this poem honor the Tongva people. May morning steps with mom reclaim the corner of Live Oak and a street named for a conqueror I refuse space to, with bougainvilleas resolved to topple a wooden wall. May these lines relieve Toy Perina of her post. 2. When alarms announce curfews and police attempt to stomp the people's demands, Dad advises mission glass at Cesar Chavez for replacing a cracked windshield. But nothing delivers George Floyd safely home to his daughter, Gianna. San Gabriel's mission's thatched roof catches fire at 4 a.m. testing structure, but nothing suffices. When a priest stamps ash to 4 heads, he says, remember, you are dust. 3, fire is renewal. Land cannot forget. Land is mother. Mother's womb is structure. Ash is not nothing. Futures are sketched in the remains. 4, when the bells finally came down, their tongues were fat from centuries of wagging. Being lashed to ropes and forced to cry was not the life they dreamed when first molded, but now they sing as 262 copper hearts, one for every year the mission stood. The Indigenous Women's Monument, forged by Native craftspeople, sanctified arts installation is dedicated by the people of the city of San Gabriel as a place for healing. Reads the sign in 5 languages. Not far off, a pedestal remains from when the people voted against a criminal statue cursing their work. The girls from the high school, volunteers baptized as green skirts, hauled the bronze to South El Monte, dumped it into the river marshes. Army of engineers ordered, let it drown. And the blue herons keep guard. Come, sit here and listen to the women and their stories. Be touched by medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Xochitl. Julissa Bermejo, I got it right finally. Next up is Andres Andy Sanchez, he. And Andres became part of my writing community, which is really where I wrote my first book in a writing circle called Las Lunas Locas, which was women identified centered at the time. But then we went on to live together. We were housemates in El Sereno, and we've been really good friends ever since. So I'm very happy to have them here. Andy Sanchez is a trans, non-binary Mexican poet, advocate, and traveler. They migrated to the US at the age of 5 and grew up in Southern California and Las Vegas, Nevada. They currently live in Long Beach with their dope little black cat, Copal. Andy has been featured in over 24 open mics in the LA area and has hosted workshops, talks, and readings for diverse communities. Their first collection of poems, This Body, was published by World Stage Press in 2020, and currently Andy teaches for the Community Literature Initiative. Please welcome Andy.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Buenas noches. So I'm glad that Cynthia mentioned during the time that we were housemates, she was writing her first collection of poems. And if I've never told you this, because we don't talk about feelings very often, like seeing you go through that process of coming up with that book, and then I knew you had that second manuscript, and you're like, I'm waiting for the right moment to put this out, really inspired me to write about my own family history and documenting a lot of my own migration and immigration story, because there's no one in our family who's doing that. And so a lot of our family history has been lost over time. My family grew up in Guanajuato, Mexico. They're from that area in a little rancho. And so a lot of that, that documentation was not kept. And so we've lost, essentially, a lot of our family history there. So thank you for that inspiration and also for putting this book together. So congratulations tonight. I'm gonna share 2 pieces. I was talking to Xochitl and I was like, I'm a long-winded storyteller, so I'm gonna read 2 pieces because they're pretty long. The first piece that I'm gonna open up with is called I Am My Roots. At first, I was from the motherland. Frijoles con queso y bolillo raised me. Corn tortillas kept me alive. I'm from where the eagle perched on nopales, green as the mountains the Aztecs called home, white as jicama con chile and limon, red as the blood of my indigenous mothers. I came from maternal abuelos raising me as their own for 2 years. From pan dulce that sweetened the days I mourned the absence of my parents. I came from el temblor del 85 that shook all the fear out of me. From my weekly shots recommended for my fragile anemic body at 4. From my first crush on the neighbor across the street. From my life on techos and macetas hanging in my grandmother's jardín. I left custom-made baby clothes bought with my mother's work in la tortilleria, for lightly used clothes given to my father by his co-workers, traded homemade sopes for cheeseburgers, made the American way. Santa Ana raised me for a few years, taught me English, but my mother never let me forget my first language, so I kept the Mexican accent cemented on my tongue. Tustin became my fourth and fifth home. Here, I quickly learned my differences when a white boy used a rock to split my head open. What are you? Where are you from became questions I could not answer, even when I felt the drips of blood from my wound. I was raised in a city translated from the meadows, Las Vegas, blazing desert summers. The rays of the sun seep deep into my skin, each day browning more. Red rocks became my playground. I wore a cap and gown for the first time in my lineage, repeated again 6 years later. Destiny called. I have never dug a hole deep enough to hold my roots in place. Until now, I've only encountered malnourished soil too soft to hold them down. My 18-year-old sister helped me drive my green Ford SUV back east near the Potomac River. Military base and Pentagon were my backyard, the Smithsonian offering free history at my fingertips. Hardly any history was mine. None of the apartments that I lived in could hold enough of my sadness, so it overpoured into the streets, made it to my work desk where I embraced my passion for health. I learned to travel, took myself on road trips to escape the isolation, got my first passport, planned trips, made a list of places I wanted to go, then packed my tiny car and watched it get shipped back west. I arrived in the city of angels on March 10th, 2014, with broken heart, but more hope. I learned to become a master, cap and gown, now becoming a legacy. Unpacked years of trauma, became my true self, learned my way around the freeways and the neighborhoods, made significant friendships. I still struggle with calling any place home, pack, unpack, live out of boxes, survive with the lessons from when this journey began. I am temporary, like how my spirit lives in this body, temporary. I claim no hood. Like my ancestors, I settle where I can find a warm place to sleep and enough nourishment to guide me through this passage. I am not local. I am seeds in the wind, leaving trees and flowers that eventually turn into beautiful fields near unplanned rest stops along the roads. I am of this world. I am from this earth. All right, I'm gonna read one more piece, and I'm actually working on a new project, a new manuscript. And this is more centered around family, but also kind of being the center of witnessing all of these things happen. And this piece is called Green Card Holder. I've held on to this green card for 28 years. The progression of the photos from my 12-year-old self to my 22-year-old self, to my 32-year-old self, a testament of all that I've lived between an A number, birth date, holograms, social security number, and digits that when put together create a serial unique to my legalization in this country. I have less than 2 years before the next photo at 42. Each piece of information is used for a different purpose. I use the card only for one, to keep living in a cycle of insecurity the next time I apply. I've been told you should just become a citizen. You can apply for dual citizenship later. I think about it every time elections come and go, still seeing no real change, still fighting for basic rights like owning my own body, like accessing healthcare affirming of my gender. I am reminded how this country tricked me into living on credit at the age of 18 if I wanted to get an education. I think about again and again how my lineage was stripped away from its foundation, entire bloodline erased, never really feeling like home or belonging. Even the Spanish that I speak is not my native tongue. Colonization has buried our stories under centuries of other stories. The only reminder of my connection to familia indígena is the tone of my skin when it browns in the summer months, the freckles on my cheeks, my short stature, and some facial features that seem too distant, that at times I can't remember who to call upon for spiritual guidance. I see the political climate tear itself between conservative Christians and Catholics. It really all comes down to matters of religion. And I gave up on that years ago. Nothing is free in this land of the free. I see a small group of people that look like me in these positions of power. I think about legalization often. I don't vote because my documentation is the only thing they haven't fully gentrified yet. It is the last thing they haven't ripped from my flesh. I don't want to become a citizen to pledge allegiance to a land that was never theirs to own, yet they keep building it with the sweat and blood of the undocumented. I don't want to swear over my heart that I will be everything this country wants, but deep down despises. An immigrant, a naturalized citizen. Even the language suggests that I am still second class. How many ways can they strip me away from myself? How many ways can the government document my struggles and call it a number? Thank you. Thank you very much. I get the privilege of introducing the woman of the night and why we're all here tonight. And I'm gonna read her bio. Cynthia Guardado, she, her, hers, is a US born Salvadoran poet and tenured professor of English at Fullerton College. Her parents, Anselmo and Margot, immigrated from El Salvador to Los Angeles, California in early 1980s. She earned her bachelor's from the University of California, Santa Cruz. She received her master's of fine arts from California State University, Fresno, with an emphasis in poetry. Guardado is the editor-in-chief of Livewire online magazine at Fullerton College, was the event producer for Lambda Literary's 2020 Lit Fest, and is a social justice activist in the community. She is the author of 2 collections of poetry, Cenizas, from Camino del Sol series at the University of Arizona Press 2022, and Endeavor for Moral Stage Press 2017. Her poems have also appeared in poetry magazine It Wow, in the words of Women International Anthology, Huizache, Voz Alta Journal, the Ancestors Review, the Packing House Review, the Wandering Song, Central American Writing in the United States, and the Normal School. Guardado also translated and transcribed interviews with journalists in Cuban exile, Normando Hernandez Gonzalez, which were published in the Madrid Conversations New Orleans Press 2013. She was also a winner of Concurso Binacional de Poesía Pellecir Frost 2017 Mexico. Her manuscript Cenizas was a finalist for the National Poetry Series. Please put your hands together for Cynthia Guardado.
She's our good luck charm. It's my little sister, Isabel. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm gonna do thank yous really quick. One, so they could be on the record. This is gonna be on YouTube, right? Because I forgot to put thank yous in the book, so there is no page that has that. So thank you to my parents and Anselmo and Margot for all their love and support. Thank you to my sisters, Isabel and Leslie, and a special thanks to Leslie for creating the painting that is the cover of the book. She also has prints for sale if anyone would like to talk to her about it after. Thank you to the University of Arizona Press, especially Rigoberto Gonzalez, for their immense support. Thank you to Natalie Center Zapico, Javier Zamora, Vicky Vertez, and Vanessa Angelica Villarreal, Emma Treyes, and Alexandra Litton Regalado for their blurbs on this book. Thank you to Jimmy Vega and the team here at Beyond Baroque for hosting us. And thank you to Lily Flor del Valle, Xochitl, Lisa Bermejo, and Andres Sanchez for joining me tonight. Thank you to my writing community for always inspiring me and helping me process so many of these poems. Many of you are in this room tonight. And thank you to my entire family and to my ancestors, because making this book would not be possible without them. Already emotional and I haven't even started. Thank you to everyone who's here tonight. I'm so happy you are here. So I'm going to begin with the second poem in the book. It's titled The Historian, and it's for my mother. And it really goes back to what Andy was sharing earlier in terms of that so much of our history, of our people's history, especially of a colonized people, is being told by white people and is not being told from people from our homeland. It's always from the outsider perspective in, and I'm really trying to honor those oral histories and the history that is ours. And in our family, that is my mother. The historian for my mother. No hay bibliotecas donde estamos guardados, y la academia es mi mamá. I call her on WhatsApp to learn about our history while sitting alone in a town, Storebridge, England. Because still she is the only person I know who knows my history, knows that abuelo era militar in 1948. I'm looking for reasons to understand a lifetime of alcoholism, and she tells me, perdió su mamá cuando era niño. I'm surprised and not because trauma. And my great-grandmother, una india, died de un susto, fear in 1942 after a white man Fear in 1942 after a man threatened my great-grandfather, a white man, over money. I am writing this because no one else has. And don't we deserve history too? I'm tired of turning to a disappearing timeline where the only highlights are the smell of a canton and the ashes of everyone before us. My mother stands in a kitchen half a world away, tries to remember for me, for her. Her research is in a deep sea of memory, and before we hang up, she tells me twice, if I find out anything else, I'll let you know. If I find out anything else, I'll let you know. When the call is over, I write, porque yo también soy la academia. This poem, instead of writing the poem about abuelo's trauma, because I don't need to prove to you why we are important. Thank you. So as Sochi mentioned earlier, the editing of this book and the feedback was kicking my ass. And there was, I think that people struggled to understand how much the Salvadorian War, Civil War, is a part of every aspect of our lives. Whether or not we were there, whether or not I was born in the United States, and whether or not my family left when it first began. And so there was criticism about the war poems in the book, as if it was like they weren't enough, they needed to be more, or just take them out. And then I wanted to figure out a way to unify these poems and really honor why I wrote them. So there's a series of them now, and I decided to title them all Call Me Refugee, because Salvadorians should be considered refugees in the United States. So I'm going to read to you 2 of them, but there are 7 patterned throughout the book, and they're all titled Call Me Refugee. This one is based on a photograph by a photographer, Dona de Cenizares, which is a white woman who was a journalist photographing during the Civil War. Some of it can be at times quite sensational, but I use these to comment on what was being photographed, as well as imagine more about those moments. Call Me Refugee. The sound of grief resonates like the prolonged warning of a muted trumpet. Villagers run and wave shards of white cloth, flags frozen on black and white film. Their eyes stayed glued to the sky in prayer. They search for bomber planes through clouds of ash. The woman who leads them refuses to look back. Her eyes darken as she stares into the road ahead. Smoke rises from their burning homes, and a young girl clings to the woman's arm. The girl's small jaw is caught open, the deep crease of her mouth filled with a cry no one will hear 20 years later. This museum, once a prison, holds time still as the woman in the photo marks Bible verses between her fingers. I lean my face towards the glass, attempt to see the scriptures in her hand. I watch the girl who stares directly into the camera at the photographer who captures their retreat. In this moment, they can only think of survival, and no one will imagine themselves in an exhibit next to a map of Los Estados that counts refugees in the millions who leave and leave. This is also a Call Me Refugee poem, and the only thing I really want to preface is it is from a contemporary perspective, looking at everything that the United States has done to train through the CIA military torture techniques throughout the globe, not just in El Salvador. And so there is a reference to a variety of wars here. When we think of torture, the news tells us it's Afghans, the Taliban, but we know it is Los Estados. Now it's ISIS, they say. We've seen footage of hooded men, their hands and feet bound tightly behind them. El capucho es una oscuridad eterna, como la humedad de un cantón. These torture displays replay 1980, decades apart, halfway across the world. The only explanation, Los Estados, and the CIA agent who teaches military men torture, instructs others how to nearly drown someone, how to not, but just barely kill them. The end of that poem, I don't remember. I think I did write this after. I went to the Anthropology Museum in San Salvador, and there was a ceramic exhibit inside the museum that was like the pieces, the people in it were about this big. And it literally was a ceramic exhibit redisplaying the different torture techniques that occurred during the war. And it was incredibly powerful. And just, I remember staring at it and seeing the parallels of the different footages I have seen about wars and torture throughout the world. This poem is also an ekphrastic poem based on Dona de Cenizares' photograph. This particular poem, photograph, I do think is one of those sensational photographs. It's a little boy holding broken tail of a bomb staring directly into the camera. But I think what's really sensational about it in terms of what there's just no way the photographer didn't ask him to pose this way. And I think it's like to show a very particular perspective, right, of the war. And I think part of that is that foreign journalists were allowed in El Salvador because it was also safer for them, because our own people could not be the journalists of that war, because then they would be assassinated. So that is part of the reason why these foreign journalists were there. And there's a whole section of this directly in Spanish, and it is to the boy in the photo. 1. A boy plays with the carcass of a bomb, its broken container, the aftermath from attacks on his village. The placard says 1988. He is the same age as me when I board planes in and out of war. In the photo, his furrowed brow weighs heavily like the ghost of his mother in the rubble of buildings still crumbling. At age 4, I was convinced the only force against me was a preschool fence and the red taillights of my father's car disappearing. Somehow, I've forgotten the war that wages in Chalate, the sound of bullets muffled by pouring rain and 2 kinds of thunder. In this photo, the boy poses alone, lifts his arm higher as if to show me the bomb's fractured tail, its metal edges like teeth. I imagine his parents must be just outside the frame when a white woman takes his picture. But this photo will not tell us his mother was killed by militares and his father joined La Guerrilla. Instead, I watch the boy glide his finger, small like mine, over the sharpness of steel, peer into the open belly of this bomb. 2. Querido Abelito, hay distancias que no podemos sobrepasar, como los fantasmas que nos ven entre las hojas del aguacate moviéndose frenéticamente, queriendo tocarnos debajo de la lluvia de estrellas muertas. Nunca nos conoceremos en los 40 kilómetros de tu casa a la de mi abuela en Buenavista, donde me da miedo dormir. En ese tiempo no entiendo cómo se quemaban los montes, ni cómo a un lado de tu casa caían bombas. Nunca nos conoceremos cuando me regrese a Los Ángeles, 4,639 kilómetros fuera de tu hogar. Hay distancias que son inmensas e invisibles, como los volcanes debajo de las montañas de Chalate. A los 4 años, nosotros no sabemos qué nos va a pasar en la vida, o cuando yo escriba de ti, si todavía tú vivirás, o si habrás encontrado un refugio eterno en alguna esquina del universo. 3. At 10 years old, caution tape wrapped around a building in Inglewood, like a noose still waiting. And I imagine a dead body, even if I've never seen one. Or at least this is what I believe. Drifting among us is the spirit of the dead boy. He lifts his finger to touch mine from an alternate universe as I point at the bullet holes in concrete and plaster. At 10 years old, Abelito sits on a hill, a volcano brewing beneath, and hopes his father will return from La Guerrilla. I read this in a book at 36 years old, and it is the first time I know his name. At 10 years old, Abelito and I hold in our hands a reality, stretching across space, hoping to repair the burn of bombs and bullets the way only children can dream of. I know I don't remember much of my childhood, and now my fading memories try to make their way into this poem I've been writing for a decade.
The black hole that sits in my brain swallows up years, and maybe this is my body's way of protecting me, the way the shell of a tortoise resists certain kinds of death. Thank you. So, since it's my book launch, I did decide I would do whatever the hell I want. And I have a giant poem in the middle of this book. It is 1,500 words, and I plan to read you the entire thing. So this is the last poem. I'm gonna give you some context all up front before I read it because I don't want to pause between the parts. So a couple of things for you to know is this poem is in 11 parts. Each part has its own like colon dual word title. And really this poem came as a response to some feedback I got to the book. And so, yeah, it pissed me off, but it pissed me off enough to write something I should have written a long time ago. There's a beautiful review by someone who I do not know that went up on the Poetry Foundation website earlier this week for my book. And they said that this book really, I'm paraphrasing, was a book not just for people who came here from El Salvador, the Salvadorian diaspora, but that it was for all of us who were second generation. And how we mitigate that, like what that means for us as being second gen. And so this is called Diaspora. This poem is dedicated to the entire Salvadorian diaspora, all of those living outside of homeland. It's going to go through a trajectory of essentially from the creation of me in the universe all the way to the potential death of us. And I think the only thing I really want to contextualize is that my parents were undocumented when we were born, and my dad chose to take us to El Salvador undocumented 2 times because it was very important for him that we met our great-grandmother. And so that is sort of the crux of why El Salvador has always been a part of my life. And then the last thing I'll say about it is that 4 generations of my family are from the same canton. Our canton only has a population of about 300 people to this day. And so I am very rooted to one place. At the end, there's going to be a reference to the cemetery where 4 generations of my family are buried. Diaspora. 1. Creation story, El Salvador. In my mother's womb, in a universe of my own, every cell of her body held memory like DNA. And now it is mine too. Her heartbeats, our first song, are the chants of my mother's mother and our great-great-grandmothers. Before my physical body was fully formed, I saw my ancestors dance and hold hands in prayer as they told stories of homeland to summon me to the Loma behind my great-grandmother's house. 2, birthplace in between. I've lived in a state of permanent limbo since my birth in Boyle Heights. I was born dying. I saw light rise out of my parents' bodies, their spirits lifting like the 7 sisters, a cluster of bulbs stretching across the universe into Buena Vista. In the hospital, my blood was drawn over and over, the bottom of my small feet dripping red. My mother said I was running out of veins and the doctors were running out of ideas. In K-Town, my mother held my fragile body in the sun, and after a while, I was no longer dying, even if I was not fully here. In me grew a deep silence. I would not speak. I had nothing to say on this earth in this dimension. I could not utter words, my spirit silently clinging to the ashes of my ancestors, to the cells of my mother's womb. 3. Rebirth, Buena Vista, El Salvador. At almost 2 years old, I refused to utter words. I talked only to spirits in my dreams. They called us back like migrating birds who return to the same place thousands of miles away. My father's body heard the call too. Over the radio in his red Fiat driving home from his graveyard shift. A man told him to take his daughters to Mama Juana, my great grandmother. My spirit knew her name, even if I had never seen her in human form. My father had feared she would die before he could show her the future, his daughters blooming. 4. Homeland, war zone. My father was undocumented in 1986, and after many arguments with my mother over the voice on the radio, we were flying. My mother refused to go into a war zone undocumented, but she knew that she could not stop my father, undocumented, from flying home. She too had watched how, when he paced at night, small strands of white light extended across the distance, reaching for his body. My father knew that in the grooves of his skin, in the weight of his cheekbones, he carried a home invisible to the naked eye. It requires a certain spirit, heavy with leaving, to see that he was not whole. In 1986, the war was bodies piling in unmarked graves, los escuadrones de la muerte, militares raping girls, 500-pound bombs. Was guerrilleros watching from the shadow of volcanoes? Was my tío Roberto living in exile in Mexico? Was a constant state of fear for an entire people, afraid to leave their homes, afraid to sleep in their beds? And still we went. Homeland, matriarch. My great-grandmother, Mama Juana, held me the way she held my father's fragile body after birth. I climbed mango trees with cousins, and in me began to emerge words I would not speak in los estados. I called out to my primas, bichas, bichas. And right then, the language my spirit always knew floated off the tip of my tongue. My mouth opened wide, my teeth tipped toward the sky. 6. Undocumented refugee. My mother fell ill when we were gone. From fear we wouldn't return from war, from fear my father would not be able to cross the border again. My father boarded a plane to Mexico with my sister and me. My aunt, the only documented person we knew, picked us up in Tijuana. My father stayed behind, waited for the coyote he paid $500 to. The coyote was late. The coyote did not arrive on time. The coyote was not there. On our journey back, my father climbed a tree. It was not a mango tree. To hide from la migra, he waited for hours or days for the coyote who was late. When my aunt returned us to our mother undocumented, her womb settled back into her body, her spirit bringing her back to life, and we waited together for my father undocumented to cross from the other side. 7, matriarch, death. In late 1987, Mama Juana died in Buena Vista. we did not go back undocumented. Eight, amnesty, refugee. In 1980, the four of us returned to El Salvador. Documented, I'm sorry, that's 1989. Amnesty was passed in 1988. I can't read now. Okay. I'm gonna start that section again. Amnesty, refugee. In 1989, the four of us returned to El Salvador, documented. And at 5 years old, I had waited what felt like a whole life to see Abuela again. Outside the airport, I searched the sea of people crowded together over the railing that divided us. In the humidity, their damp arms clung to one another as they waited for those returning home. I searched, lost in their waving hands, for the face of Mama Chila. This moment etched into my mind forever. She leaned over the railing, her green eyes searching for the face of her child. I saw Mama Chila's shoulders rise as she waved a white handkerchief, and she was smiling, or maybe she was crying. This the first time my mother returned home after almost dying in the desert, after believing they would never see each other again. 9, El Bus, welcome home. I want to contextualize this one. So my uncle, on my mom's brother-in-law. He owned a bus line from Arcanton that went all the way to San Salvador. And so when we would go visit, they would pick us up in El Bus. And so this is about that. On our trips to El Salvador, my uncle picked us up in El Bus. When we boarded El Bus, our grandmother, cousins, uncles, and aunts were like fireflies in the night, lighting our way on 3-hour trips home. These are the bus rides I want to remember, the ones where we loaded our luggage and boxes of gifts and hand-me-downs from my mom's bosses into the pale blue black door of the bus. On the ride home, we twisted around in laughter as we stretched our bodies closer to one another. The sweaty dust in the air lifted around us, and all our voices roared loudly over the engine. In this reality, I don't remember a war. All my body holds is home. 10, bus militares. We rode crowded buses from El Tablón near Arcanton to Sonsonate to visit Padre Hector. In the humidity, our clammy skin kissed strangers. Men hung out the back doors, the damp air a kind of relief. On the roof rattled the canastos filled with mangoes, queso fresco, yuca y arroz. I'm 5 years old, the first time the militares stop us. Outside El Bus, our bodies line the road as they inspect documentos. The silhouette of a man in the shadow of the sun stands on top of El Bus. I watch him, watch us as he inspects the canastos in the corner of my eye. I see the armed militares working their way slowly down the line. In their hands, a list of names, guerrilleros they've sentenced to death. They ask for cédulas, and my parents display their frayed paper cards. One by one, we are allowed to reboard El Bus. We each shrink our bodies into safety when we pass the militar, whose face we cannot see, partially blocking the entry. When the bus pulls back onto the road, I sit on in my father's arms, staring out the window at the boy left behind, left for dead. 11, planes in between. War erased the timeline we were meant to be born to. And in it, we emerge refugees in the in-between. We've boarded planes over and over again, in and out of war. We are not whole here or there. We live in a constant state of shock. We hold our breath, often afraid we'll suddenly become extinct. In the in-between is where Mama Chila, Mama Juana, and Mama Olivia live, and Papa Chema, and Tio Roberto, and Tio Alejandro, and Doris. All my ancestors are in El Salvador, in the El Salvador of my mind, the one I imagine while I sit on the beach in Los Angeles. There, they are never gone. They are in the home that lives in every cell of my body, a place far away, but more real than here. All my people have been born from the ashes of volcanoes. All my people are buried in El Panteón de San Rafael. Today, we rake the fallen leaves off tombs of our ancestors. And my mother said, if she died in El Salvador, to leave her there. I said, aquí vas a estar con todos. In the in-between, you'll exist forever. Thank you so much for being here and for letting me read my epic poem to you. I'm going to be signing, the books are available in the bookstore, and I'm going to be signing books outside in the patio, and there's wine and refreshments and some non-alcoholic stuff too. So I would love it if you would join us. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you.